It's not often a company that makes products for the actual, like, higher tier industry in audio or video or what have you, makes a solution that also works for live streamers. And that is what PreSonus have done with their universal control software for their Revelator line of products. And admittedly, when I first reviewed the first audio interface in this line that I tested, which was the IO24 last year, I wasn't as big of a fan. I saw the potential of how it could be adapted and used for streaming, but I didn't think it was actually applied in the right direction, or however you want to see it that way. They have updated the software, they have updated the capabilities, along with their new interface, the IO44, which is what we're using both for my microphone and for showing this off in this video. And I am very stoked at the fact that they're listening and the fact that they can show how a high quality audio interface can be used for both workflows. Let's jump in today's tutorial. I'm EposVox, the Stream Professor, and I show you how to get the most out of your streaming, tech, and general computer use and all that. And today we're just doing the tutorial I promised a few months ago for the Universal Control software for the PreSonus Revelator line of products. I just reviewed their USB dynamic microphone, they have a USB condenser microphone, and now they have a few different audio interfaces that are absolutely great for live streamers, and they offer some of the same features that the Elgato Wave, the Go XLR, the Beacon Mix and Mix Create offer in terms of audio channel routing and all of that, and it has a built-in DSP in both the interfaces and the USB mics, so you can make your voice sound super good. To access the software that you're seeing here, you go to your system tray, and my webcam is blocking it naturally. This is why I should not have set up the scene this way, but go to your system tray and you're going to have the Universal Control software. Once you install it for your audio interface, it pops up this, lets you change the sample rate, the block size for ACO and things like that, but it will list any Revelator devices you have connected. And as I showed in my dynamic USB review, it'll show multiple ones, but you just click on it, it opens you here. There is a lot to take in with this software. It looks fairly simple, and overall, I think it's laid out fairly intuitively, but there's a lot to take in. So let's take it one step at a time. First and foremost, the main UI here. At the top will be your audio processing settings for any given input. At the bottom is your mixer and your bus interfaces in terms of all of your different routing. There's a lot of routing capabilities. We're going to talk about it. But let's just start with the basic. I have hooked up a microphone. We've connected it here, and we have it connected. By the way, for this recording, I have both the microphone line as well as the two virtual submixes here, and hopefully my editor and I will remember to make sure that we indicate when we are switching between them for the purposes of those topics later in the video. But I have connected a microphone to the XLR port. This is the Earthworks Ethos, incredible microphone, and so we have it activated in the main microphone channel here. If you're using the IO24, you'll actually have two different microphones. This one only has one XLR port, but then you do have a headset mic input as well that you can access separately. And you can see here, this actually has separate audio settings. But for now, we're focusing on our first input. You set your gain with this dial over here on the left. We're sitting pretty at about 25 decibels of gain. You can also turn up reverb. Reverb is a whole separate SYN channel that you can mix to your different mixes if you want to get nice and echoey. Here, we will switch to Stream Mix A for this. I will turn up the reverb, and we'll just crank it up. Reverb! Yeah. Theoretically, that should have been in the Stream Mix. So you control the reverb SYN on the mic itself because you can change it per source, and then you can just adjust how much it goes to each individual mix. So for example, my headphone mix has no reverb, the Stream Mix has some, the second Stream Mix has none. We'll cover that more in detail later. But you got gain, you got reverb, then of course you have 48 volts of phantom power. I'm using a condenser microphone. It's still a broadcast microphone, but it is a condenser. It requires 48 volts of phantom power to power. If you're using a dynamic microphone, it does not need it. However, again, I stated this in my IO24 review, the preamps in the Revelator products are decent, but for high gain microphones like the RE20 and the SM7B, they do struggle a bit to power them cleanly, and I would recommend a microphone activator such as the Coda Stealth, the Fethead, the Cloud Lifter, the SoU Launcher, any of those options, and those will take phantom power to then apply the additional gain to your microphone. But we have, your loudness so that you can see if you get too loud. Loud, loud, loud! It gives you a clipness indicator. Clipness? Clipness is not a word. The hell am I smoking? Next to your loudness and your weird clippiness, I guess, indicator, as I called it, you have the noise gate attenuation. So you can see when it's cutting out background noise based on your threshold of talking. Gets louder when you get quieter. That's the idea. I will say, again, gain. We're going to have a whole separate video dedicated to like getting the perfect audio on stream in terms of the software side soon. But more or less, you want your average peaks here to peak around like -6 to -10, which is kind of what we're aiming at here. And then that way you have plenty of headroom for those loud peaks, as I was clearly just doing. Then you have mute and solo. So you can have an individual device be the only device going to a specific mix. This is more meant to be kind of like a temporary toggle, because otherwise you could just turn down the faders. It's a standard mixer feature. And of course you have the mute, which does not mute if you access the individual audio device. It mutes it to the mixes. And I will show you that actually right now so that we can show this a little better. So the way this interface works is much like a multi-input mixer or something like the Go XLR, in that you can access each individual device as its own audio device in Windows or in your streaming software, but then it provides the mixes for you that you can access separately. This is more convenient because in most cases, you're just going to be sending a final mix either to your streaming software or to Zoom, Teams, Skype, Discord, whatever. But you have the ability to access both. And so things like the level fader and the mute button and the solo button only apply to the mixes themselves, not to the actual, if you just hook the actual microphone device. So for example, if we go in here to our OBS settings and go to audio devices, under microphone, I can activate the mic instrument device itself, which is what you're hearing now, but I can also choose the Stream Mix A and the Stream Mix B that I can choose from. Now the main mix you cannot choose from, because it is just meant to be for your headphones, really. But you can choose the Stream Mix A or the Stream Mix B as separate devices, as well as the line in input. So you can manage those separately as a fourth submix, effectively, in your streaming software if you'd like. Because now I can sit here, okay, I have the line in and the mic added separately. They are down here in the audio devices, and I can drag and manage their levels separately on their own. Now, I will say, the headset mic and the XLR mic come in as left and right channels on the audio interface, which is how most dual input audio interfaces work. It's really frustrating. If you are just using one, you can downmix to mono with this mono button here in OBS's advanced audio settings, and you'll be fine. If you're using ACO or the ACO plugin for OBS Studio or your DAW or whatever, then you can access them individually. But streaming software for Windows, these interfaces never set up mono devices. I don't know why, but that's just a caveat you're dealing with here. So that is what your main microphone channel on the mixer section itself looks like. Then you have the exact same setup for the headset mic. You have the 3.5mm headset mic input. You don't get phantom power for it, obviously, but you get gain, reverb, and your levels, as well as mute and solo. And then you have the line input. So this IO44 differs from the IO24 in that it has a dedicated 3.5mm line in jack, which they advertise as being used for, say, DJ workflows where you have a separate mix coming in. You could use it for your game consoles if you have an HDMI to 3.5mm converter, or your monitor has a headphone or line output, which is fairly common. And so you can get a whole separate stereo source in here, which again, I just showed you can add to OBS. And you can manage its levels here, as well as trim, which is basically just like kind of an added gain boost or pad, because this is a level. Level differs from gain. We can talk about this in a separate audio fundamentals thing, but this is basically gain or padding on the input itself to affect how it literally takes in the signal versus the level that it goes to the mix. And then you can apply reverb to that as well, which is pretty cool. You can also apply the Fat Channel to it, which is really magical. We'll cover that in a moment. And then you have your separate faders for both the playback device. This is a separate device that you can actually assign audio to in Windows that just shows up as your headphones. So this will go to either mix, and that's really cool. So you technically have 3 virtual audio devices because you can send audio to the playback left and right, or you can send to the virtual output B or virtual output A, which are these virtual devices. So much like the Go XLR, the Beacon Mix Create, the Elgato Wave, this device creates 3 virtual devices that you can route audio to, such as separating game sound from voice chat, game sound from music, etc. You can route audio separately to these virtual devices. They'll be all mixed separately to your headphones, to your stream output, and to that third submix that you can use for whatever you like. Separate mixes for streaming and recording, separate mixes for voice chat and stream. You have a lot of potential here. There is a lot of power available through these 3 different submixes, plus the ability to make your own submixes in OBS, plus the 3 different audio devices. It is technically less devices or fewer devices than the Elgato Wave or the Beacon or the Go XLR, but I think it's enough for most people. Most people do not use all the devices that those other tools give you. So you can manage muting, volume levels, and soloing for each of these individual virtual devices right here, which is really lovely. Then, of course, as I mentioned, you can apply reverb to either 3 of your input devices individually based on the gain, and adjust how much of that reverb and the size of it and all of that goes to individual mixes. So I'm going to turn that back off for this mix. My bad. So that's the mixing section in terms of the core, like what you would normally see on the mixer. And then you have your headphone mix section over here on the right. And this allows you to control what you actually hear. So you have a master fader for each individual mix, and this will actually control what goes out to your stream. Obviously, you can control that again in your streaming software, but you can mute the entire mix. You can control the fader for the entire mix. You can also turn the individual mixes into mono if you like. For whatever reason, you have that capability. And then you can also link either of these stream mixes to your main mix. So whichever mix you are monitoring, when you click this link symbol, those levels are going to be adjusted to how you hear them in your primary mix, which is useful if you just want to make sure that you are hearing, that you are hearing everything at the same level. You can also adjust which mix you're actually listening to. So the toggle that the beacon mic stuff gives you, you can choose which mix actually goes to your headphones. So you can always keep an eye on what you need to hear from that, which is really powerful. You also have additional adjustment for the main out, which is the two 1/4 inch jacks on either audio interface, which can run to your speakers, your studio monitors, a separate mixer, whatever. You can adjust the output levels for that. You can adjust your headphone levels here, and you can adjust the blend between your like real-time monitoring and your actual mix levels and things like that with this dial as well, which is pretty neat. So before we get to the mic Fat Channel and all the microphone processing and all of that, I want to demo the submixing workflow for you here. As mentioned previously, I have both the microphone itself as well as the tube submixes added to OBS. And so we are going to start assigning sounds to the different submixes so you can hear how this sounds individually. So I'm going to set my Windows playback to the playback device that I showed you, the first virtual audio device. And I'm going to start playing a video. I'm going to start playing this video about this modular synth that I am currently borrowing. That is going to the playback device. So for Stream Mix A, if I come back here to our screen capture, for Stream Mix A, I'm going to turn that all the way up, and actually up a little bit so that my audience can hear it. But I want a separate recording that is maybe trying to be safer for YouTube's algorithms or something like that, where it's going to stay muted so that the VOD doesn't have it. Or if I'm recording game highlights and I just happen to be playing a video or something, I don't need that audio messing it up. So I'm going to leave that muted for Stream Mix A, leave it up for Stream Mix B. Secondarily, I'm going to start playing music. So I'm going to open up VLC Media Player. I'm going to open up our backing track music folder. We're going to play the new Synthwave album, which is coming out in June. I'm going to set the audio device to Virtual Output A. And that is just going to be rocking some music to Virtual A. So for my headphones, I'm going to turn the music pretty far down. Like I want to hear the video, but the music I don't need to hear. I need to focus on my game a little bit. I just want to know that it's there. For Stream Mix A, which is going to my live stream, I want music to be there, but I don't want it to be overpowering. So we're going to set it to like -30, maybe -32. That should be okay. For Stream Mix B, which is my recording one, again, maybe just using for game highlights or something. Again, I want the music and the video muted. I don't want any audio except maybe my voice and the game going to that. And then I can fire up a game. I don't want to launch a game while recording all this stuff, so I'm just kind of going to simulate it with a video capture of a game. So I have a video pulled up. I'm going to go to the Windows volume mixer and assign my media player to the virtual output B. And then I'm going to play that video, which may not have any sound because this is not the screen capture I was looking for. Let's do that one. All right. And now we're going to go back to Universal Control. You can see here Virtual B has some audio. Again, for that second recording submix, I do not want. For the stream mix, I do want them to hear it, but I want it to, again, not be super overbearing. So -11. And then for my main headphone mix, I do want to be able to hear it a little bit so that I can, react to it in chat. Because that's going to be my game. Actually, if that's my game, then yeah, I want that all the way up. Maybe turn playback a little far down. So now we got to go back to Chrome because that video stopped. Play that back. All right. So now we have a headphone submix where I hear things differently than the stream hears them. And then I have a separate recording mix where pretty much everything except me and the game, which we're going to turn up here. Actually, we want the game at like, what, -24? That's probably good. So now we have a recording submix, a streaming submix, and a headphone submix separate from each other. And now my editor can switch between just my microphone, the stream mix A, which is the live streaming mix, which has everything going on super loud. And then we have stream mix B, which is just me and the game. Boop.
Video mix.
Boop. Pretty cool. Again, this is the functionality everyone wants for, this is why the Go XLR was, part of why the Go XLR was so competitive. Part of it was also the microphone processing we're going to cover in a minute. And it was why, you know, the beacon stuff, and the Elgato Wave is so cool. So it has all of this. This is really cool. Finally, let's talk about processing your microphone, because the PreSonus Revelator products has a DSP built in. This is a digital signal processor. It's hardware processing for your audio, be it the USB microphones or the audio interfaces. Both categories have DSPs inside that process your microphone and allow you to do good processing effects and things like that without using up CPU cycles or anything like that. And that's what we're going to dive into last here. So any input device, not the output devices, just the input devices, give you access to their Fat Channel, and their Fat Channel is their post-processing suite. I'm still not a huge fan of the UI. I don't like this big obnoxious dial for the preset selector. You can click this name and do a dropdown though. This is how you save presets. That's a little weird. And then you have this hotkey effect, which is just supposed to do some crazy effects. Just slap back. I don't know if it's actually working. It might be one of the three mixes. And then it saves a couple of the presets on the buttons here. Like, I'm still not a fan of the UI. I think it's weirdly obtuse and confusing, but I can walk you through the basics because it's really powerful. So again, ignore the stuff on the left. Just focus over here on the right. So again, these are your presets. You'll choose between these in case you have different microphones or different modes you want it to sound, or maybe different processing for it up close versus further away, whatever. And then you have your Fat Channel. Now, if you want to be super basic with it, you can just adjust these buttons. So you got a high pass filter. You can choose what frequency it drops off at. You got a noise gate. You can choose the aggressiveness of it. You can choose a compressor, an EQ limiter. This is not very detailed, but if you want to just, I want a moderate limiter. I want some of these EQ presets, whatever. You have that available to you, which is pretty cool, including a de-esser mode for the compressor, which is nice. What if you want to get deeper though? We can do that. First and foremost, again, they do come with presets. So the IO44 specifically has a broadcast preset. This is the broadcast preset. Actually, I'm going to turn the gate down. The noise gates on these presets always break for some reason for me. So this is the broadcast preset. This is the vocal preset for like singing vocals, I guess. This is the acoustic guitar preset, which has no relevance to the voice. Actually, most of these don't. This is D2 vocal. Probably sounds terrible. This is a robot. And this is what I built for my Earthworks microphones. It's labeled Icon Pro, but I tweaked it for this one. And again, you'll see some of those buttons on the left changed based on what was already selected. It's supposed to be like a quick access area for the button, like the interface and the microphones have preset buttons on them. I still think they need a lot of work on that. But you have all those settings. If you want to dive in, this little like EQ or like faders looking button is how you dive into the Fat Channel. It's also up here at the top right as well. Click that, and now you have a whole suite of processing available to you. So we're going to start left to right, because that's literally how the chain operates in terms of what step applies where. So first and foremost, high pass filter. This rolls off the low end to keep from being super boomy. I don't know why it's set to 40 hertz. I usually set it to about 60 hertz. We'll set it there. The second module is your noise gate. You can set up a key listen to try to listen for your noise levels. You can enable or disable an expander, which is basically going to not only gate sounds below a certain level, but then kind of push down sounds above that level to make it a little bit more natural. So like a noise gate is great for cutting out a consistent background, like ambient tone, like a hiss, an AC, whatever. An expander is going to help some of those more random, bumps and stuff that you have there. You got your threshold, attack, release, and your key filter to listen for specific frequencies. I don't use key filter or key listen a whole lot, so I don't have a ton of experience, I will confess. Each one of these modules, by the way, you can turn off or turn on at a moment's notice. So if you don't want to use one entirely, or you want to see how things sound without it, you can do this. By the way, someone mentioned in the comment section of my review of the dynamic microphone, you can actually set up all of this in PreSonus' Studio One DAW, their audio software. It has the exact same Fat Channel, so you can access those settings if you turn all this off in the Universal Control software. Get it, it's a lot easier to EQ and tweak your sound of your voice when you're not listening to it bouncing around in your head. So you can do all that in their software and then translate the settings over to the real-time software in the DSP, which is really cool. And I get the feeling you can probably export a preset to then import into the Universal Control software, but I haven't messed with that yet. All right, next up is EQ. You have 3 different kinds of EQs available: standard, passage, and vintage. Passive, I say that every time. I'm a huge fan of the standard one. This is a basic parametric EQ. You have 1, 2, 3, 4 bands of EQ to work with, which is not a ton, but it's fine. Cut the mids, boost the highs, tweak your lows to cut out the muddiness. If you're using a super bright microphone, you actually might want to turn the highs down a little bit here. You got this. You got full control over hue width, the gain up to -12 and +12 dB, and then the specific, you can dial in the exact frequency that you want. You can either scroll, type in, or drag, which is really great to interact with the dials. You have the compressor. Again, you got 3 different kinds. You got standard, tube, and FET. Again, I don't mess with the other stuff a whole lot. It's still on my list to learn and tweak with, so I just use the standard one. You got your threshold. I recommend setting a higher threshold when possible to keep some of your dynamic range and make it more just general nice and pleasing. Attack release ratio and gain. And again, you can set up key listen and key filter to turn it into a de-esser, but it seems like it's not super easy to turn it into both a de-esser and a standard compressor. So you have that. Now you do have this button between these two to actually swap whether compression happens before EQ or whether EQ happens before compression. I tend to prefer these days to have EQ happening after compression because compression makes such a big difference on your sound. But you can try it either way, and whichever you like best you can work with, or you can tweak your EQ underneath the compression, like color grading under a LUT or something. You have that available too. Lastly, in the normal processing, you have the limiter, and this basically just stops anything after a certain point. So obviously the compressor is bringing your loudest parts down, and ideally you're not getting any louder after a certain point, but you know, if you have a bunch of peaks and you're using a softer compressor like I do, the limiter just keeps you from digitally clipping at all, which is really nice. You do have a final option here in the Fat Channel, which is voices, which is just a series of filters that allow you to do a bunch of different effects, detuner, doubling, vocoding, ring modulating, some basic filters and delays. I'm not going to mess with that here, but you can have a lot of fun with that if you want to do some special effects. You just have to manually kind of turn them on and back off. And then once you're done with your settings, you come down here to the save button. You give it a name. Bloop. Store it. It did not go anywhere. We click store. I don't know where it went. Oh, you got to click one of the... Again, I'm not a huge fan of this UI, but you got to click one of the spots and click store. And now it'll be in the drop down or in the dial. Just don't touch the dial. Just use the drop down. But you get the idea. Between all the virtual audio cable mixing, the multiple submixes, which are technically 3 if you count your headphone output, plus the ability to build your own submix in your streaming software, and the incredible DSP on board to give you lots of effects to control the sound of your voice. The PreSonus stuff is really cool. I've been a huge fan. I haven't shot my review of the IO44 at this point in time. I do wish the preamps were a little beefier, a little chunkier in terms of powering the low output dynamic mics, but that's okay. And yeah, I promised this tutorial a few months back and just was waiting on them to update the software to really kind of show off the potential how I think it should be, and I think they've gotten most of the way there. I think there's still some work to be done, but I appreciate what they're doing, and I wanted to show you how to use it, because a lot of y'all on our Discord server have been hopping on the interfaces and the mics, and I'm super stoked to see it. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did and found it helpful, check out this other video on my review of PreSonus's Revelator IO24 or of their USB dynamic microphone, and links to everything will be in the description below. Remember, be kind, rewind.